Eric, how do you pronounce your title?
The Macon and Joan Brock Director.
Okay, Macon, good. That's what I thought, just to be sure.
That's a new title. I don't even have business cards that say it yet.
We'll get you the t-shirt first,
Right.
then the business card.
I think I have to start. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Villa Albertine. I am very happy to introduce this last episode of our second season of the museum series. Our series dedicated to French art and culture in American museums. Today, we will virtually visit the Chrysler Museum of Art, Norfolk's most iconic museum. We are very honored to virtually welcome two prestigious guests today, Eric H. Neal, Director of the Chrysler Museum of Art, and Lloyd DeWitt, Chief Curator and Curator of European Art. Both of them will be in discussion with our museum series moderator, Faya Kosei. Faya is a scholar and educator whose interests range in era from the Paleolithic to the present. She started her career as a professor of art history in California and recently retired as the head of academic programs at the National Gallery of Art in DC. At the NGA, Faya oversaw the internship and fellowship programs, as well as developed the weekly public programs, often serving as moderator. Faya's advanced degrees are from the University of California in Santa Barbara. And although her primary field is ancient art and her best known books on amber, she has also published on different artists such as German modernist Sigmar Polke, Michelangelo, or Paul Cézanne. Faya continues to be involved in different cultural institutions, serving on local and national boards. For instance, DC's own Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens and the Archaeological Institute of America. Recently, she was elected as member de la Société Paul Cézanne and also a fellow of one of the oldest educational charities in the world, the Society of Antiquaries of London. Dear Eric, Lloyd, and Faya, thanks so much to the three of you for being with us today. And I leave you the floor now for this very exciting and promising museum series. Thank you very much.
Well, it is exciting, and I am so glad that we get to go to Norfolk, Virginia, to the Chrysler. I want to say that the museum is open Tuesday through Sunday, Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5, Sunday, noon to 5. It's always free, and it's got free parking too. And this is a museum that has also a really marvelous website. I highly recommend it, and I have a favorite part. First of all, it's so inviting, but then there's a little part that says must sees. And when you hit that, you see highlights of the collection. That's something a lot of museums could learn from. So the address, One Memorial Place, Norfolk, Virginia. Put it in your GPS and on you go. I begin by introducing the director, Eric H. Neal, the Macon and Joan Brock director. Eric came to the Chrysler Museum of Art in 2014. And as director, he has reaffirmed the strong community focus of the institution with public programs and outreach, and revitalized the exhibition program. Under his leadership, the Chrysler has also enjoyed significant advancements in diversity and digital technology, just to name two things. His commitment to showcasing the skills of the museum's talented staff has resulted in several Chrysler curated exhibitions, including, and I'm just choosing three, Thomas Jefferson Architect, Americans in Spain, Painting and Travel, 1820 to 1920, Alma W. Thomas, Everything is Beautiful. With the support of anonymous donor, I'd like to mention something else. The Chrysler opened the Wonder Studio, its first interactive gallery for children. That was in 2018. Neal as young as he is, has been leading museums for more than 20 years and was first named director of Newcomb Art Gallery of Tulane University in 1999. Earlier in his career, he was an active curator and worked with many notable artists. I didn't list them all. He has also published books and essays in the history of architecture, the history of photography and contemporary art too. He holds bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees from Princeton and Harvard universities and has been awarded numerous grants and fellowships. I want to name just some of the institutions that awarded him such things: the National Gallery of Art, the Mellon Foundation, Dunbarton Oaks, and the Canadian Center for Architecture. Now, a personal note. I first met Eric in 1994, my first year at the National Gallery, when he became one of the first ever graduate lecturing fellows at the National Gallery of Art. There are in the gallery archives letters from members of the public who in his year of lecturing were so dazzled by his eloquent introduction to works in the collection, wrote letters to the gallery. And now I'm turning it over to Eric.
I was unaware of those letters, Faya. I'm very curious now. And I have to thank you for giving me a job at a very important time in my life as I was finishing my dissertation. And the experience at the National Gallery was really very formative and wonderful. So thank you. And those were good times. We still have good times now, but I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone, the French Cultural Services, for thinking of the Chrysler and for welcoming us today. I know probably many of your visitors are in the Washington, D.C. area, and maybe not all, but the Chrysler is certainly very reachable by car and by train. And if you want to spend a day or two at the museum, you can also head on down to Virginia Beach for some sun and ocean as well. So it is a very congenial environment here. Norfolk is a beautiful city, and it's not one that is as well known as it might be. So I'm very pleased to be the director here. And I'm also pleased, I should say, about reconnecting with you after a long time. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not going to say too much more today. I'll just say a couple things about the Chrysler, and then I'll turn it over to our chief curator, Lloyd, who will talk more about French art at the Chrysler. But people might be interested to know that although we were founded in 1933, 51 years ago, Walter Chrysler made a transformative gift here. And that was something we celebrated that half a century last year. But we have 30,000 objects in the collection, and I don't know the exact numbers, but something like 75% of those are coming from Walter's collection. So that's stunning to think about. And the works range from ancient Egypt up to the most contemporary. And even Walter collected the art of his time as well. So that's something to think about. So our ambitions are broad. And the quality of the work in the collection is very high. We are known probably for, I would say, particularly 4 strengths of the collection. And Lloyd will be talking about part of one of them. The European painting and sculpture collection is outstanding, as is the American painting and sculpture collection. But we also are noted for our collection of photography, which is very strong and continues to grow, as well as glass. And glass is what distinguishes us. I think we must be one of the top 3 collections of glass in the country. And it's been an impetus for so much more here too. We have a wonderful glass studio, Perry Glass Studio. You can come and see glass making every day at noon. And I'm also, I have to say this, we've just launched a public campaign, a $50 million campaign, and a big part of that will be a great big expansion of the glass studio. So there's a lot happening at the Chrysler. We are free. And also I would note that we have a very nice relationship with the French community here in Norfolk, because we have NATO has an important installation here, and we have many French visitors, officers who are stationed here for 2 or 3 or more years And I'm happy to say that that has been a wonderful ongoing relationship that we intend to continue. So vive la France, right? There we go. With that, I think I've said enough. I encourage anyone watching to come visit the Chrysler. We welcome you with open arms. And Lloyd, I'll let you take it away. Thanks again.
But before Lloyd gets to talk, I get to introduce Lloyd.
All right. Okay. Right. Oh, yes. He's got a long resume too. Yeah.
Well, since Lloyd's going to talk about the collection, I've had to shrink it down. I hope it's okay. But Lloyd DeWitt is the chief curator and Irene Leach, curator of European art at the Chrysler Museum of Art. I'm not going to even ask him how many objects are under his care, but you got an idea. He is recognized not only for his exhibitions, but also for his scholarship, publications, and expertise as an educator. His PhD in art history was awarded by the University of Maryland, College Park, where he was the student of Professor Arthur Wheelock, who was curator of Dutch and Flemish art at the National Gallery. He also just retired. And the National Gallery, is also where I met Lloyd when he came for visits or to attend programs. Lloyd's dissertation on the career of the Dutch painter Jan Levens made him a leading expert on the artist. And he has absolutely asked him what happened on any day in 1673, and I'm pretty sure you're going to know. His earlier education, he received his MA in art history from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and his BA with honors in fine art was earned at the University of Guelph in Ontario. Now, before he came to the museum and during his time as a museum person, he has taught at 4 North American colleges and universities and led numerous conference presentations. And you'll soon see why his lectures at the podium and in the galleries garner such acclaim. And now it's time for you to take us. Right.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just share the screen. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Great. Well, Fayu gave me a really tough job, and I had to distill the French treasures down to some essentials. You'll even find this is a little more than we discussed, but I couldn't help myself. I think I was going to dial it back to the beginning. We have medieval treasures, but I think one of the great early treasures we have is this Book of Hours of the Master of Rouen Espionage, and it was the result of my predecessor, Jeff Harrison, really looking at the collection and seeing what was missing and adding this spectacular Book of Hours by this great Rouen master, which has this, of course, the beautiful foliate and a number of these full-page illustrations in it. So it's a living collection where we are looking at what Chrysler gave us and also filling in what needs to be filled in the areas that he didn't collect so aggressively. And one of these was works on paper, did not interest him as much as large-scale paintings. Chrysler loved stories, and he was also loved France, and he was a very good friend of Picasso, who is a Spanish artist. I've included him in this range, but he was frequently there and built up an enormous collection of Picassos, which over his lifetime, he then dealt back to many dealers and turned into this encyclopedic collection, which has just, I think, a very smart group of French works that are, each of them tell great stories. And this is what I really appreciate about Chrysler's eye, is that he had an eye for what the public would grip the public. And art that told stories was not necessarily the most popular thing in the 1950s when he was collecting, but he took the long view in building a collection that was really suited to a public museum. Very unusual way of collecting, but it's what he liked to do. And he, for instance, he acquired this very large Francois Boucher, which would be a pride of any world museum. The very sexy pastoral, the vegetable cellar, in this ravishing landscape. It's a huge work, as you can see, part of a decorative ensemble, which has only recently been put together by scholars, that people have been looking, what are the mates to this? What room was this in? So more work to be done, which I always like to point out is a great part of museums, is ongoing research and just feeding the curiosity. But it's works like this that make the museum visit so compelling. And each one of them is a surprise and full of stories and full of rich detail here. This is not a minor Boucher. Largelière is a work I like to point out because he's a very successful artist. And this is one of his most important works, a self-portrait with several self-portraits all combined into one fantastic visit to the artist's studio as subject. You get the big wigs, but you also get this lovely entree into the art world, into what the artist himself valued. One of the greatest Bouguereaus in the country is in our museum, and it's not a winsome little girl with a cupid or so forth. No, it's a massive, major work by this French neoclassical artist who I think really defines the high point of French neoclassicism as it lasted well into the 1800s. Orestes, Pursued by the Furies. It's a painting that can also teach you about justice and I think really brings these classical subject matter alive, the kind of perfection of light, the nude, all these things are combined here. But the size of the painting is also, it is huge and very, very impressive and accomplished, just exquisitely balanced. So go ahead.
Lloyd, can you just tell us how big it is?
Oh my God.
Huge.
I don't have the size. It is huge. I think it's 5 or 6 feet wide. Okay. What I do remember is that it didn't fit in the door of one of the museums that asked to borrow it recently. And that was a sad moment for that museum. Here, Hubert Robert creating this wonderful kind of pastiche postcard. You get all the great monuments of Rome in one painting. If you can walk around Rome, it'll take you all day to see all these things. Robert has conveniently put them into one. An exquisite painter of antiquities and architecture. This is a major work, but it's especially great for the public because you get to take a little trip through Rome. It's not just some little fountain off in the hills. It's a major experience together with the kind of people that he would have experienced there. Yes, I did sneak this in at the last minute. Quick fingers here. Chardin, jewel-like painting, absolutely marvelous. What I love about Chardin is he makes it look easy and fast. Chardins are not easy and not fast. He painted with like a visor over his head. So there was absolute stillness in his studio. These are laborious things that look easily because of the absolute love of visual effects that he creates. He makes the humble into something truly triumphant, a simple basket of plums. But you can start to see they're wrapped in paper, and you're in Paris and people are buying stuff at stores now. So he's tracking a change in the way people live and experience these great subject matter. Here's Tocqué, portrait of himself, a good painter with great clients. And this is the master of the king's works for Louis XV, but also someone who is successful in a different way. He's the guardian and probably also the father of Madame de Pompadour. So he's a well-connected man. And so you can sense the rich life experience on his face. It's not just his one job that counts, but it's many, many connections here. Where is this painting? Where is this great, important French painting? It's in the Chrysler. And really unbelievable Gérôme. Gérôme, truly an arch neoclassical painter, but also a master of the orientalizing subject matter. And here is a boat being rowed across the Nile. It's not, the souls being brought to the land of the dead, but it's just the excursion of the harem, 1869. It's the perfection of this moment, the glass smooth water. You can really feel the heat and the slight breeze. He composes a perfect, look at the birds in the sky. I mean, even they behave and add to the sense of perfection in this work. Chrysler also collected interesting things that are only now coming into larger conversations. Here's a Guillaume of a Saharan dwelling in Biskra in Algeria. Well, look at all the people making food here. This is, we're doing a show called Farm to Table. It's going to be at the Chrysler in a few years, with along with 3 other venues. It's a exhibition that we're developing ourselves with the American Federation of Arts, and examining all the ways in which food changes in France in the later 1800s. So art tracks this marvelously. And one of the great topics is the colonies and the expanding world and the changing French awareness of foodways elsewhere. And no one's more alert to this than Guillaume. He's got everything at the Farm to Table is all in one picture here. These works are an opportunity for great new projects, but projects that we would never have dreamed of 20 years ago. But because of the way conversations have changed, we get to plunge into the collection again and come up with new discoveries. Here's a real crowd favorite, Gustave Doré. It's also one of Doré's favorites, The Neophytes, based on a novel. And we also bought the drawing for it. And Gustave Doré himself explained, he'll be over the wall tonight. Here's the young neophyte, realizes, oh my goodness, what he's gotten into, and decides he's not going to dedicate his life to being around these old guys. He's going to live a little first. And this is a massive painting. I think this is well over 6 feet wide. It's a monumental work, exactly the kind of thing that Chrysler loved, and something that would really grip the public. Something colorful and engaging, and something that tells a story. This is what Doré is famous for. So you're getting a sense of the time period, the range and time period that Chrysler mastered in assembling all these things. And again, this is just a selection. He also got this great Cézanne, Bather in the Rocks. And it's one of these early bathers that really establishes Cézanne's expertise in the bathing subject matter, which is a kind of classic subject matter, even though Cézanne is someone who's also deeply engaged with modern life. You can sense him, how he's already analyzing what he's seeing and breaking it down into these units, but is also interested in the body here as well, in nature. It's a fantastic work. It was recently at the Jewish Museum because it was stolen by the Nazis and then restituted again to Alphonse Kahn. And they were able to go into that quite a bit. It was part of the Gallery of Martyrs that Rose Vallon assembled at the Jeu de Paume in Paris, this gathering point for pillaged works. So it has had a history itself. That's not why Chrysler bought it. I'm sure he found the subject very compelling. He also acquired this amazing Degas, and this is one of his earliest acquisitions. Dancer with Bouquet, famous subject matter here, favorite of Degas. What I like is that he includes the backdrop here, and you really get a sense of how seamlessly the transition occurs here between the dancer and the stage set and the story that she's interpreting through her dances. So many museums have the smaller scale versions or works on paper. Chrysler seized a really monumental Degas dancer for his a collection, and the collection was always for the public. Chrysler loved to assemble exhibitions and send them all over the country. And you still find these catalogs in used bookstores from the 50s and 60s of Chrysler's collection going to museums all over the United States. He was a showman at heart. Here's Claude Monet. We have at least one, but often more, by every major artist, French artist that Chrysler thought had to be in a public collection. And Vernon was one of these places that, especially the church, that was done over and over again by Monet as he examined the different moods, the different times of day, the different kinds of climate, trying to capture the sense here, probably early spring. You really had a sense of something awakening here in this wonderful view of Vernon by Monet. Pissarro, an unusual Pissarro, a very perceptive one. Here's one of the key Impressionist artists and somebody who's more than that. So I think someone who really worked to keep the Impressionist movement organized and gave it great strength. And here he's looking at a maidservant, probably somebody from the country, not quite altogether comfortable with the role of serving people glasses of absinthe in the middle of the day. But you have a sense of how things are changing in France, and different parts of the country are coming together. Paris is not just one culture, but it represents so much of France. And then the Gauguin. I mean, this is a painting which I think in the Me Too era really warranted a lot of re-examination. We installed now with a photograph by Rieneke Dijkstra, a young woman, to really make the question very direct about, you know, what was Gauguin doing in his images of young women. And what you don't notice so much is that the fox has its paw on her chest, but she also wraps her hand around and embraces it. So a difficult image, but still, I think considering where it exists in Gauguin's oeuvre, it's a major Gauguin, and it's really unbelievable that we would have it and be able to present it in the middle of with other artists belonging to the Pontevin movement. And a real, very interesting part of Chrysler's collecting was adding pointillist works. He's got several of these large-scale works by leading masters like Luce. Here, the footbath. You're beginning to see social commentary and monumentality coming back into art with these works of art. Also, the dazzling surface of color. Strokes recently been cleaned by our fantastic team in the conservation department. So it has. It's much more glorious than I think anyone has ever seen it. So it's another reason to come by, is because we are constantly getting to see reinvigorated works of art on our walls because of our very strong conservation department. Luce, Signac, Couturier we have. But here I thought I'd slow down a little bit just to examine a couple works in depth. And Rodin's Age of Bronze is one that I'm particularly thrilled to have in the collection. His first great masterpiece, and this is a lifetime cast of this work, which is quite rare and only exists in a few museums in North America. And it's just so such an important part, a moment in Rodin's career. It's when he's just emerged. He's just gone to Florence to see the anniversary exhibition of the works of Michelangelo, and he is inspired. He's completely changing his career. His interest in the raw muscularity of Michelangelo's sculpture. He's already shown that in some of the works he did for his employer in Belgium. And here he is, a young Belgian man acting out the role of kind of like one of the slaves of Michelangelo as the vanquished is what this was originally called. In the wake of the Franco-Prussian War, he tries to capture the sense of despondence and grief in the pose of this young man. And he worked from life with Auguste Knight, the young man in question, to try to capture that through the raw physicality and the expressiveness of the work. And of course, he was so effective that he was accused of having cast this from life. It's a grotesque insult. And he had to literally prove using photographs that in fact he had sculpted every part of it himself. Normally you think this would be a huge compliment, but in the very highly charged critical atmosphere of Paris in this time period, and of course the incredible advances in the French art world that are represented by all these other artists, he had to really defend himself as a sculptor, somebody who was interpreting life and not just copying it. And from that moment forth, he swore that he would never, ever cast in life size again. And this is why Rodin's are either huge or small. This stinging rebuke of this episode really stayed with him through to the end. So this, I think it's just fantastic to have this particular work. So to me, one of the great treasures.
Well, Eric, wait, can we go back just for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned right at the beginning is that this is a lifetime cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to really underline how
Yes.
important that is for our audience to know the difference. I mean, yes, there are, so you take it away on lifetime.
Well, Rodin was so nice that he let the French state, he gave all his contents of his studio to the French state, including all the equipment it takes to make new Rodins. And he generously allowed the French state to cast as many as they wanted. So there's always been a strong distinction between those that are lifetime casts made under his supervision and those that are made later on. Now, of course, the Rodin, Musée Rodin, and all the committees and all those involved have continued to use the same foundries. And in fact, the casts made afterwards are of exceptional quality and technically often quite better than the lifetime ones, but still the ones made under his own supervision have a kind of a special attachment because they represent his ongoing development of the subject through the manufacturing process. But yes, you can order a brand new Gates of Hell if you want right now. The French state has capped all the series at 12, but they're not all full. So and they also will allow fragments and sketches to be produced. So you can technically buy a real Rodin that's been cast just last year at the Musée Rodin in Paris. But that makes these lifetime casts all the more important, especially early works like this, which are so pivotal to Rodin's career and his artistic mission. Well, thank you, Faya, for pointing that out. Yes, there are collections, and we even hosted them here, of perfectly fine casts from the 1980s. But it's just it's not the same in a certain way, although it is still a great experience. Here's one, I think one of Eric's favorites, Georges de la Tour St. Philip. What a magnificent work. Those buttons really grip you because the rest of St. Philip here is so humble. Here is a French Baroque artist who's really interpreting the apostles, going back to early Christianity, interpreting them as rough, simple guys. It's just how the Bible describes them. He finds a new truth. He didn't do a lot of religious art, but he did do this great series, which was in Albi until it was dispersed in the south of France, of the 12 apostles, which are still held to be kind of iconic touchstones in the story of French Cadovagism and in French Baroque art, of the development of realism. And there's almost nothing like them. Philip and the others, it's so distilled, this moment of quiet and of reverence and of humility in the rough hands, in the expression of the face. They're almost peerless. To me, it just sums up this age of the French Baroque, better than almost Claude or Poussin, the sense of spirituality that a number of artists, but especially de la Tour, captures. And here's another exhibition project that we're sending on the road is Art Nouveau, Triumph of Nature. You'll see it at a number of museums across the country in the coming years, because we have an unusually large number of excellent examples of French Art Nouveau furniture, glass, works on paper, even objects for the desk and everyday life and living, because Art Nouveau is a kind of total work of art. It's a design environment. And one of the greatest masters, and not necessarily a household name, is Louis Majorelle. And he ought to be a household name. He worked in Nancy, and this is not Paris, this is Nancy, but Nancy was very industrial and a lot of nouveau riche people there because of the newfound wealth and technical prowess of craftspeople in that area, including the Majorelle family, who are doing great Bombay reproduction Louis XV furniture, exactly the skills you need to do Art Nouveau. Beautiful inlay wood patterns, but so cool, so sophisticated, and looking to Japanese prints, these compositions that tend to be kind of a freeze-framed, beautiful subjects from nature, breaking all the rules of furniture making. There's no sense of architecture here. Instead, you've got the organic strength of wood and the flowing, smooth forms of nature and the combinations of brass ornament, often quite funny, and the pictures and the constantly flowing forms of the furniture pieces themselves. So this has been one of my great discoveries, is to really plunge into the work of Machiavel, of Dom, and the competitors in Nancy, all bringing their works to Bing, the great impresario of Art Nouveau, and his Art Nouveau gallery in Paris, and the 1900 Universal Exposition in Paris, where Art Nouveau really became the dominant French style, really took over the world at that point. And I think it's been unmatched since. Luxurious forms and just so enjoyable. So really thrilled. And this is the furniture that the Chryslers lived with in at least one, but probably several of their residences. They really enjoyed being able to display their Art Nouveau glass on the furniture that was made for it at the same time. So that's another great project. Of course, I think, drum roll, this is probably our greatest single work of art from France, is Renoir's Daughters of Durand-Ruel for 1882. Of course, it's a completely charming work of art, an icon of Impressionism, the beautiful dappled lights, the sense of the ever-moving brushstroke. Everything about this speaks of the triumph of Impressionism in France. But it's not just about the triumph of Impressionism in France, because of Durand-Ruel, who is this great art dealer, and he brings Art Nouveau to the United States, where it finds a very, very passionate audience of buyers, essentially saving the Impressionist artists who were not necessarily financially successful until this great moment when they were discovered in the United States. And other artists had the same moment, Bouguereau as well. Really, his art took off when American collectors discovered him. So the Durand-Ruel family is portrayed many, many times by the grateful artist Renoir, who in a way revives the Rococo here, going back to Boucher in the sense of the pastoral, of the lovely, ever-flowing surface, the charm, the enjoyment of nature, the effects of nature, of people living in this environment. Yes, it is not a political art. We're not seeing the suffering of people in the countryside here, but we are gaining new insight into an experience of nature, and people. The world has completely changed. This is about an art that tracks change, and about a world that is constantly, and light that's constantly changing, and so forth. So just the sense of what's going on in thought, in science. This is something that Impressionist artists really have their I think their finger on in ways that are even today kind of hard to really encapsulate in one work of art. I have in the top corner a very charming little work. It's a little sketch by Renoir. It's very important to the history of our museum, because in 1967, a very important year for other reasons, by the way, but in 1967, we did not have a Renoir in our collection, and it was thought that we weren't a real museum unless we had a work by this great French master. So several people got together and launched a subscription, and the entire community put their shoulder to the work and raised money to buy a beautiful Impressionist Renoir, and a very great and fresh little sketch. It reminds you of the coquille that he did later on, but it's not one of those. It's a truly Impressionist work done directly from nature, of exactly the kind of work that leads to the works like you see on the left. Who knew that only 4 years later, one of the greatest Impressionist paintings in the country, in the continent indeed, would find its permanent home here. But you can see the passion for French art in the community. There's a direct connection between that little sketch and the great masterpiece that we have. And then finally, I'd like to spend also a little time on our Tissot. his name, although he went by James because he was such an Anglophile, we'll forgive him that because he came back to, he's somebody who's a friend of Degas, really trained with Ang, but really is identified with the Impressionists because I think his work is so closely tied to them in technique and subject matter, especially being a painter of modern life, not just working with a beautiful stroke and observing changes in what you see in front of you, but also as a keen observer of the world, the changing world around him, but of habits and so forth. And he decamped for England in 1871. Several artists did because of the war, and then came back in 1885 and launched a series called the Women of Paris, Femmes de Paris, and three kind of sections of the life of women. These were very modern women, often very independent, but he also captured the kind of social critique that was still being focused on women in society. This is one of the lighter moments in that whole series, The Artist's Wives. What's happening here is that everyone's breathing a sigh of relief. This is about the art world, and that makes it a lot of fun, I think. The vernissage, which was actually a literally vernissage, the varnishing is over. Everyone, as the whistle's gone off, everyone has to stop fixing up their artworks at the salon, the great yearly official exhibition. And now they get to celebrate all the works of art that they've created, and all the work they put into they're presenting themselves at the annual exhibition. They're at the restaurant Le Doyen. You could still go there today, having a fabulous lunch. And they're just pouring out and onto the terrace, checking each other out. This picture, of course, shows people eating. So we love it because of that. And it will also be part of our farm to table exhibition that's coming up. Art and food in France in the later part of the 1800s, but it's also a subject of ongoing research because we're trying to find out who all is in this picture. It's a little bit maddening, and we just in my short time here, we've been able to decipher a few more of the portraits here, but we swear there are many more. So please, if you recognize somebody, let us know. I'm just giving you some example. Tissot, of course, friend of Degas here. He is portrayed by Degas in the middle of Degas' studio. On the right, we've got the San Francisco self-portrait by Tissot. Here are some of the other works that are part of that series, the Femmes de Paris. The one on the left is the collection that I used to be a curator of in Toronto at the Art Gallery of Ontario when I was curator there for 5 years before I came here. The shop girl, the merchandise being checked out in the shop was not just the notions and ribbons, but unfortunately some of the women themselves. But such was the life of women in Paris in a very urban, commercialized environment. Lots of judgments being passed about people displaying themselves, widows, casting too keen an eye on the young officers in the distance there off to the right. So you can see that our picture is a more relaxed moment. So who do we have here? I think we've got John Lewis Brown, who is here painted by Boldini. And there are several Boldini portraits that are kind of quoted verbatim in this painting. So he might be a road of inquiry that might be productive here. I think we've got Verdi, also from a Boldini portrait. And then I'm pretty sure that we also have Rodin with his red beard here off to the right. But some of the other faces are yet to be identified. So we have had a...
Wait, go back.
Yes.
Eric, no, you've mentioned Rodin.
Yeah.
Let's go back. And you mentioned possibly Verdi.
Composer Verdi, yes.
Yeah. And go back one more.
And then John Lewis Brown.
Right. So now will you take us back into the painting and with your pointer, show us where they are?
Let's see.
You can.
So can you see my arrow at all?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Here is Rodin.
Okay.
Here's Brown.
Okay.
This may have been added in a way that it makes him look a little tipsy, but I don't know if I think this was just a bit of a gaucherie of adding something at a later point. And then Verdi is over here.
Okay. Okay.
But we've got a dashing young man over here. I swear somebody must know who that is. So anyway, we love this kind of thing because we get to spend time, not too much time, but we do poke around and ask our colleagues, and other people have come forth with helpful suggestions as well. So again, this is a social event, and we really are getting a picture of Tissot's connections and his world and his commentary on the art world and culture of this moment. I think this is a kind of high point in the series, a very important series in Tissot's career.
Lovely.
Yes, and then just a reminder that we did actually have a Tissot exhibition here. Okay. We had the Brooklyn's incredible Life of Christ, one of the 2 series that he did. Right after he did the Femme de Paris, he then departs for the Holy Land. He is very devout Catholic and applies his great skills to coming up with yet more truthful images of the biblical stories. And this, if you go, there's 3 separate trips. So that's the late Tissot. we get the Parisian Tissot in our fantastic painting. So this, I think, is always a great point of departure because it just makes people hungry, and you can send them off to go get dinner at some delicious restaurant and to enjoy what they're enjoying there. But for us, I think just you can hear the glasses clinking. It's just, and the smell of the food as it's being brought out, to my mind, is a delicious painting. And I'm really thrilled that we have it in this collection. But who knew that Chrysler would have stumbled on such a fantastic and really pivotal work way back when? But he had foresight and vision. Great.
Thank you, Lloyd, and thank you for taking us through this marvelous survey, and certainly to span the years as well as the breadth of the collection. And there are a few people who came on a little bit later. So I just want to, if it's all right, if you can go back on the microphone again, Eric or Lloyd, and just say one more time, how many works of art did Walter Chrysler bring? I mean, what is the Chrysler gift, the transformative gift? That's 1971, right? Mm-hmm. So it's
started in 1971. Yeah. It continued for a number of years into the 80s.
Yeah. Right. And that, and just to, again, for the people who tuned in a little bit late, how many works of art in 71? It was 10,000?
Something like that. A little less than that. I think 7,000, Lloyd, is that right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. So,
right. And then continued to give, as we saw from the inventory numbers. One of the things for our audience in this series that we've learned, and for those of us who've been in museums a long time, is when people look at labels, they will say, that's the artist, or what's the title of that again? And then there will be maybe the person who gave it, but they won't be as excited necessarily as museum people to see what the inventory number is. One of the things that at your museum you do is you say the gift and the year. And I think that that's interesting for people when you realize you keep walking through it. He gave that in 71, he gave this in 71, but it is, and then, but of the slides you presented, Lloyd, we saw one that was 77, for example, and gives us a sense of the ongoing nature. And amongst the list that you chose for us was, of course, the Renoir, let's say it's Renoir before Chrysler, that was raised by subscription. And I think each one of these things, I mean, gives us insight into the strength of a museum, the nature, and the other part, which I do think came out in both of your introductions and presentations, are ongoing exhibitions. And just to go back to what I said about Eric, I just named 3 of the exhibitions that were originated at the Chrysler. You have taken loan exhibitions done elsewhere, added to them, and the Tissot is a good example. But the Jefferson exhibition, I just said that Jefferson Architect, it had a far more elaborate title. But this was so important for Virginia, and so important and wonderful that it could be at a place with a director with a very strong sense of architecture. So just wanted to point that out. But if you wanted to say something about the enticing two exhibitions that you mentioned, Farm to Table and the Art Nouveau, I think Lloyd gave us an idea about the Art Nouveau, and we're all going to come and want to go to Nancy afterwards. But Eric, do you want to say, or both of you say a bit more about this Farm to Table exhibition?
I will say something, but really I'll turn it over to Lloyd pretty quickly. But just to say that it has been an initiative since I've been director, as you mentioned, that I felt we could be a generator of exhibitions, that we could be a great partner with museums around the country. So like our Alma Camus exhibition did travel to Washington to the wonderful Phillips collection, and our and it's now going to Georgia, and our exhibition on Jacob Lawrence that opens up later this year in October will be going to New Orleans and Toledo. So we're very happy to be part of a national dialogue, and it's really exciting. And Lloyd is continuing that trend, and these are both exhibitions that where he is the either the lead curator or one of the co-curators, and I think I'll let him talk about them since he's been working on them.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Eric. It has been a thrill to watch the institution, also everyone in the institution, just be so energized and flexing their muscles and growing as we become this generator of important new exhibitions. And I think these are topics that have not been done before. So it's original research. But
the Farm to Table, especially in this day and age, and also how that's, what it's going to be and when is it going to be. And we need to already have our cars facing out of the driveway to go to Norfolk, so we know when. So tell us a little bit.
Yeah, Farm to Table is, I think, in 2024, 25. So we're still working out the final timing of the venue, so we can't announce a lot yet, but it will follow. It follows the theme of food from the farm to the table. So we get to go to the countries and look at farming and changing farming practices in this very this time period of great turmoil in the food world. So
it goes
from about 1850 to 1900. So, but we're looking at, it's not just great paintings, a lot of great paintings that a lot of great paintings in our collection, that we've got a lot of good paintings about food in our holdings already. So we get to highlight the strengths of our collection, but we're borrowing works from major European museums and American museums in order to present the most powerful exhibition about what is a compelling subject, hasn't been done before for this time period. Looking at the invention of the restaurant, a celebrity chef, and as new foods come forward and new ways of experiencing them, and also the changes in the lives of people as they migrate from the countryside, as they experience colonies and colonization. All these things have really powerful impacts on how people experience food. And it's all traced in art. A lot of fabulous paintings about enjoying food.
Okay, 24, 25, we put it in the calendar.
Yes, exactly.
We do have a couple of questions from the public.
Yeah.
Back to the Rodin. That Rodin reminds me of sculpture by Camille Claudel.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's a famous Camille Claudel. Of course, was he was her teacher and lover, and it was a very intense time. She fell ill, but she had some amazing works of art that she produced at that time, very closely tied to, but very distinct from Rodin's in style and subject matter. She really was her own artist. She is also in one of the Rodins in our collection. There's a work of art called The Convalescent, a beautiful marble sculpture, which is therefore not a cast. It's unique, which it appears that he looks at, try to examine this period of her illness. It's in its own way a kind of troubling work when you consider the power relationship, but it's also about artists looking at each other. So we have that on display right now. And it's, we're looking at our labels and updating them in-house as well, to make sure we're getting, the most up-to-date points of view and questioning how things were interpreted in the past. That's kind of an ongoing effort. And then what do we have? Oh, what did Chrysler do anything in his life?
Wait, okay. And we have another question. We have two more questions. First of all, did Walter Chrysler do anything in his life besides collect art and party? Well, and then just so we have 5 minutes or so for other questions, I'm going to ask you the other one. Are there women artists in the collection? And I visited once. This person writes, and it was a breathtaking experience.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you can answer both of those questions. You want to answer?
I will jump to Walter P. Chrysler Jr.'s defense. And I will say this, that he was born into privilege. Yes. There's no question. And he did have some professional activities, and particularly involved with the Chrysler building in New York, as we've come to learn. And in fact, the sale of that building provided him with funds to buy art. What he did was what I really admire, and maybe it's because I have a job because of this, but that he created a collection and he gave it to a city and he made it free. You can walk. He didn't make it free. It wasn't free, but he gave it freely is what I meant to say. He felt that it should be in an urban center that people could access, and he did something that today would be maybe not impossible with an extreme amount of wealth, but the things that he was able to acquire, they're just not there. So from my standpoint, it can be challenging because yes, he was absolutely a man of privilege, and he's complex and it's complicated, his life and the stories you hear and how he dealt with dealers. And there's a lot there to unpack, which I will not delve into at the moment. But I will say at the end of the day, he created this wonderful collection and he gave it to the people. And that is something to be admired. And it wasn't just it was not an investment. He was not just kind of flipping for sport. He was creating something that was really meaningful. And I think that should be valued. I think that should be valued. And we have people who, we have 200,000 visitors a year who enjoy it. So I'm happy about that.
Breathtaking, says our questioner. Lloyd, do you want to, and I have another question also, do you want to talk about some of the female artists in the collection?
Yes, exactly.
Time. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I should point out that almost no other collector was collecting with the public mindedness of Chrysler. So we need to point that out because he was a man who knew of all the world's museums, and that's what he had in mind, was the public. We have great women artists in the collection. For whatever reason, Chrysler was very keen on representing great women artists. We have one of the best Angelica Kaufmanns, who worked, Swiss artist who worked mainly in Paris, major French and neoclassical artist. One of her most important works, we have it in the collection. And then of course the Cassatt, beautiful Cassatt, is in our collection. Lesser known is Lucie Couturier, who was the not just a member of the pointillists or divisionists or neo-impressionists or whatever you call them, but she also published them and supported them. So a role of a woman artist that's really not well known. So I'm really proud to have a Chrysler in the collection. So yes, in fact, we do have, we're very proud. It's small but growing, but we're glad we have important works by women artists in the collection. So,
and I just want to, and it's the permanent collection is one thing, but I do want to underline that Eric mentioned it too, is that exhibition of Alma W. Thomas really was marvelous, and that it went to other venues. So there's a way to build out. When we have, I just want to make one last comment from somebody who sent this in, and that was, this person wrote, I was fortunate to see the artist's wives at an exhibition, James Tissot, which was at the Chiostro del Bramante in Rome. Anyway,
Yes,
so you've already answered the second part about Tissot, and partly in Norfolk that there was an exhibition, but I'm sure we will find out more as you find out more about the people in the painting. So maybe we can go to your website and try to find that out. Well, we're just coming to the end of our hour, and it seems to me it's gone so quickly to be able to visit with you at the Chrysler Museum. And I want to thank all of our attendees, and thank you very much. We're closing out now our second year of this museum program, and I hope we'll all see you in Norfolk. So thank you again, Eric. Thank you again, Lloyd, and thank you again to all of our colleagues at the embassy. I want to particularly call out again Laura Baude, who works with us on this program, and Denis Canel, who is the attaché for culture. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And thanks to the French Embassy especially.
Yes. Thank you all for having us and thinking of the Chrysler. And please come visit. We'd love to have you here.
Thank you.